The next session is Transforming Employee Experience with Conversational AI. Artificial intelligence is helping human resources segment to focus and deal with more complex tasks that require considerable human interaction, such as creating a more engaging workplace and career development. How does AI predict an employee satisfaction, making recruitment easier for the better? And let's hear about it right now. We have with us Tanmaya Jain, founder inFeedo, taking us through this relevant piece. Tanmaya Jain is helping HR leaders of close to 200 plus brands to engage remote employees and find hidden gaps in their culture. Pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon, Tanmaya. Over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Justin. It's an absolute honor to be back here at NASSCOM. Last time I was at NASSCOM AI Summit in 2017. So to be specific, it's been almost 5 years. So it is refreshing. And I was recently reading up on Sundar Pichai, and like when we were discussing the concept of AI with a few friends, something that came out was he said that AI's impact on society, if you look at it, like if you look back a few years later, will be compared with that of fire and electricity. And that's how much companies like Google are betting on AI. And that is so inspiring for folks like me to see how far we can go ahead with this. But I want to talk about today, right, 2022, and in specific, address some elephants in the room before we even get into this concept. And number one, for at least for all of us as employees, is Monday mornings are terrible, right? We struggle to wake up. We call them Monday morning blues. We live in a time where trust is toast. And if I have to be specific, 58% of employees would trust a stranger more than their own manager. So clearly we have a problem. We live in a time where we send 50, 60 questions as surveys to employee every year. We treat employees like bots, let alone directly talk about bots. And all of these problems about retention, engagement, and everything we hear about burnout these days, where more than half of the workforce across the world is burnt out, it's dumped on individuals we call as HR business partners. The reality is in large companies, the ratio is for every 500 people, there is one human trying to solve all of this. And in even larger enterprises, for every 1,000 people, there is one HR business partner trying to solve for all of this. And then, of course, HR gets a bad name for not being able to solve for this. So clearly, we have a problem at hand, and we've been served absolutely terrible software in the past. And that's where things changed for us in the last 5 years. So here's what's common about companies like Tata, GE, Samsung, Lenovo, Times. They've all decided to tackle this a little differently. They have an individual they call their chief listening officer. It is their AI assistant called Amber. And there is 6 years of research and science behind how this chief listening officer, a C-suite team member, operates in their companies. And here's how she works. So step one is, of course, she uses this science to interact with employees individually, personally, from their very first interview till their date of joining, till 90 days after they complete their probation, till their 1 year, till their 5 year, all the way till they leave, and 30 days after they leave as well. So she's genuinely, continuously listening and having relevant, targeted conversations with all of these employees to genuinely understand how they feel. And step two, she actually has the conversational AI. It's proprietary in-house, plus it's combined with GPT-3, which is an NLP algorithm with 175 billion parameters to make sure she can understand paragraphs, she can understand sentiment behind what employees are saying. So for example, if at day 90, I pour my heart out as Tanmay as an employee, Amber or the chief listening officer can understand what I'm saying, if it's positive, if it's negative, what needs to be done, and so on. And that's the change companies like Tata and GE are making, where they have an individual understanding of every single employee. And what's most fascinating to me is people are genuinely willing to trust a bot more than, let's say, their own manager. Because what do you do when you have a toxic manager? Like, you can't go to your manager, and you're not sure if the HR will sort of keep it confidential. But when this chief listening officer who reports directly to the CEO comes to you on a special milestone saying, congratulations, Tanmay, on spending 6 months at Tata, on this special occasion, we want to understand how you feel. that's when the game changes. But it doesn't stop here, because most of you who've tried any kind of survey in the past know that it gets very, very overwhelming. And as I mentioned, HR business partners are dumped with data, dumped with problems. So when you have thousands and thousands of employees speaking to Amber or this chief listening officer, how do you really filter through this noise or excessively overwhelming amounts of data? So there is a predictive algorithm where Amber will predict who is disengaged or most likely to leave. And basically, at the end of the day, if you're Tata CEO or CHRO, from 1,000 employees, you can drill down to maybe the top 5 or the top 50 who are disengaged and most likely to leave based on all of the interactions they have. And what's most interesting is companies like Make My Trip, thanks to this, have been able to improve their retention by 12%. We had a startup as early as January 2022 this year, where someone spoke about suicide to Amber. And this was, of course, detected by our algorithm, and it was flagged directly to the CHRO within minutes, and they claimed to have saved someone from committing suicide. 4 years back, there was a case where there was this individual who was struggling with harassment. It was a very different kind of harassment where she came from a different background and she was being neglected. She did not know who to go to. So when she spoke to Amber, in a 1,000-employee company, the CEO directly intervened because that sort of flagged all the way to the CEO. And what's worse is sometimes in large companies, things get lost in hierarchy. But thanks to at least AI and Amber, you make sure that what's most important in terms of a toxic manager, in terms of something that's blocking any employee from having a great or phenomenal experience in your company, some things that are making your culture toxic, all of this boils up straight to the top. And you make sure you're able to act on it on time. And for me, one of my favorite use cases is, if you look at Southeast Asia, or if you look at global companies where you as a CEO maybe are not able to speak the languages across the world, you can actually understand how your employees are feeling in a language you don't even speak. Because for us, one of the biggest challenges was, how do you scale AI from English to 100+ languages, whether it's Bahasa, whether it's Spanish, whether it's French, and so on. And that's where it gets more and more exciting. But I don't want to just focus on retention, right? What we've also observed is sometimes most leaders tend to measure impact by retention or attrition of their top talent. It is also the individuals who are existing in your company and are just existing with a 9-to-5 attitude, where they may have checked out, they're disengaged, some of them have become borderline toxic. They are the ones who actually need more help and attention than the people who have explicitly decided to quit. That's where we want to make sure that it's not just about attrition, but about culture as well. And how can we work towards a mission where in the next few years, we want to make at least 100 million employees feel heard and valued using conversational AI, as opposed to dumping this problem on the HR business partner. And as I end today, I want to address the question that, will AI replace HR? And a lot of these questions keep coming up to us. What is really the role of AI in the long term? Will it replace our jobs and so on? And I started with Sundar Pichai from Google, so I thought I'll end with Steve Jobs from Apple. In the 1990s, there was an interesting situation when he was launching the computers. And in some developing countries across the world, there were riots that, oh, the computers are going to come and replace our jobs. So he actually came up with this line back then that what the bicycle was to legs was, he said, the computer was going to be to everybody's minds. And I would like to say is what AI will be to HR, right? It is something that is there to augment you, to help you, to make you more powerful, as opposed to replace you. And I think we've had enough. Like, HR's got a bad name for the longest time. And we're finally seeing an impact in companies like Tata, GE, etc., where CHROs finally have a seat on the table and they're actually making a difference in their culture. And that's what we're all about. And I genuinely hope, as Sundar said, that we maybe 100, maybe 500 years later, we generally can compare AI with fire and electricity. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanmaya, for that insightful talk on reinventing employee experience with AI.